Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. With this video, I'll be reviewing the DM's Guild supplement, Ishavar's Guide to Curses by Matej Budimir for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shout out to my platinum patrons, Andrew, Richard, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick, and Rodney, and gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy and Yuma, Marcos de Vicente Gilberto, Sean, A.K., Cert 2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, and Sam. Thank you all very much for your support. Monstrous Races is often a tricky thing to add to a game if players are excited to embody some of these more exotic creatures. It can lead to some huge balancing issues, not to mention the issues, of course, of just walking around as a creature that is normally killed on sight, for example. That can add a whole other host of role-playing issues that's the DM gets to tackle. Ishavar's Guide to Curses is, first of all, it's a bit of a misnomer in terms of the title, because when I read it, I was like, okay, this is all about curses. And this Ishavar person is going to be involved in some way. That is wrong on both counts. And I get that the tendency to make supplements, Valo's Guide to Monsters, Mordenkainen's Tomb of Foes, Xanathar's Guide to Everything. I get that that's a thing that Wizards is using for 5th edition. But when they use those names, those are also characters that the authors embody in the text. So they'll have these little blurbs or sidebars that are by those characters. So those, the Xanathar has its comments written in there. This Ishavar thing isn't anything. Like there's no person named Ishavar. There's no side content with any of this person saying anything. It could be anybody's guide to curses. It doesn't really matter. So that's kind of weird. And the curses part, there are new curses included here, but they only take up about 3 pages of the 30-page supplement. So that's 10% of the actual product. What it does give us are new player races, new player subclasses, some new backgrounds and racial feats, and even some new creatures, all tied by this. I guess you could think of them as cursed player characters in terms of, because I think Medusa's originally cursed. I mean, a lot of these kind of evil races were, you could think of them as the entire race has been cursed through some way. So harpies, vampires, if you want to think about them as cursed. So it kind of uses curses in terms of not curses that you would necessarily bestow on your players, although those are included here, but entire races that have been permanently transformed or afflicted, and that is how they are cursed. So that's just something to kind of realize. It is in fact more of a Xanathar's Guide to Everything, crossed with even a Valo's, or because it combines player races and subclasses, as I mentioned. It's half for players, and the other half is technically DMs, because it's got the curses and the blessings, and then the new bestiary, which is going to be a bunch of creatures that a DM is going to use. So it kind of has both in one, making it a tricky sell for one part of the table or the other. But I am very positive on this product. I think it has really, really well balanced races and classes, some good ideas and concepts in there. I like the theme behind more of an evil theme, but not necessarily chaotic evil, and you can always role play as, I'm one of the good Medusa and all that. And it mentions that that's certainly a possibility, although most of these creatures tend to go, most undead are evil, but you could certainly play as a non-evil undead. So I like those options are there. This also has one of the most gorgeous art I have seen in a long time on the DM's Guild. And apparently the author is also the artist, which I think is just not fair. You should not be allowed to be both good at writing and drawing. That is damn, spread some of that out. Let some of the rest of us have a little bit of talent. This is absolutely incredible art. I mean, you can see the character art on the cover. This is actually the kind of art that is found throughout this supplement. It's fantastic. I absolutely love the artwork here, and it is a professional presentation that makes it look like literally I tore pages out of the player's handbook or the monster manual or something, which is also great. You don't have to do that in order to make your product look good, But if you do it and do it well, and this is an example of having it done very, very well, then it looks fantastic. All the font is right, the presentation, the way that's got the little quote at the front, and then some background information, and only a couple paragraphs for each little section, the traits, the names. All of that is exactly done according to the player handbook, and it makes it look really good because they also have the art to back it up, and this art looks fucking gorgeous. It is just beautiful. Like, that watercolor style is incredible. I love this art. I love the presentation, the layout. All of that is just 5-star material. So as I mentioned, the balancing is always a tricky factor for new player races, and I feel like they do a pretty good job in giving either some severe kind of restrictions or limitations to what you can do, or also give you some weaknesses. In the case of the half vampire, obviously you've got sunlight sensitivity. If you're stabbed in the heart, you are instantly paralyzed. You can't enter somebody's domain unless they invite you in. I feel like everybody's got their own vampire rules, kind of similar to how zombie movies all have their own rules. So it's spelled out here. There are certain rules that are here. But on the plus side, you've got your innate fangs. You can always polymorph into a bat with no restrictions, which is pretty damn useful considering you do have a gain of flying speed. I mean, you're a bat, so it's not really used for combat, but still, you essentially can wild shape as many times as you want as a bat, which is pretty damn useful. You have innate spell casting of seduction type stuff, so charm person and friends, and then you can actually, I think, eventually heal by biting somebody. But you do need to consume blood to stay alive. So yeah, half vampire. Hell yeah, I want to play Blade. That sounds great. Let's do it. The Ashen are a fire race, which is, again, not too crazy. They have fire resistance. They can kind of glow themselves. And then you've got a fiery soul, which just means starting at 3rd level, you gain a auto strike back at anybody that attacks you with a melee weapon. You can deal fire damage equal to half your level rounded up, but it doesn't cost reaction or anything else. It's just always on. So again, it's not terribly impressive damage, but there's no save throw. There's no action to do it. You just always have it on. So you can combine that with a tank, and that's just kind of added damage. So, or that would go really well with the new subclass, the Sorcerer Flameborn, which is also really cool. So a good example of like a restriction is the Harpy's Flight. The Harpy, and flight is a big problem in 5e because of the Aarakocra, which are almost universally banned, because it's just such a headache for one player to be able to straight up fly, at level 1. That seems really unbalancing for tier 1 gameplay, and I would probably agree with that for the most part. The Harpy, you do have the flying speed of 40 feet, but you can't be wearing medium or heavy armor, and it only works in short bursts, which means you fall at the end of your turn. So you can really only use it to cross distances within the span of a turn, and then you would fall. So I think that is a really interesting limiter on it. Now you might be saying, oh, well, that defeats the purpose of the wings. Well, what the author has done here is used racial traits to actually unlock your basically your signature ability, which is a very interesting way of balancing it. So instead of automatically gaining that effect at a certain level, you instead have to spend one of your trait level ups. I guess I'm having to go. Let's see, where are the traits? There they are. I just skipped past the classes for a second. So the traits, there's one for each of these monstrous races. First of all, they all have a level requirement, so you can't take it, right off the bat at level 4. They are traits, so if traits are banned at your table, then you'll never be able to unlock your really good ability. And you would have to take them instead of your ability score improvement, the ASI. So those are all, very specific things that have to happen in order for you to gain it. And in this case, for example, the Harpy at 9th level, you can take this racial feat to, first of all, you can wear medium armor and fly at the same time. You can increase your dex score by 1, and you no longer fall at the end of your turn. So you basically have unlimited flight at that point. So I think that's a really interesting way of balancing it. And that's the same for like the Medusa has a limited petrifying gaze that only like restrains people at first. And then at 17th level, you can finally gain the actual petrifying gaze, for example. Vampire regeneration at 12th level, Ashen resilience at 7th level, where you can boost your fire resistance up to immunity to damage. I think that's a really, really interesting way to balance it because, again, these are like signature abilities that players will want to use because you're playing this race presumably because you want to be able to use these, abilities that go with that race. But on the one hand, you don't want to upset things, especially right off the bat at tier 1 level of play at level 1, because normally it's balanced where you would get abilities as you level up. So in this case, I just think it's a good way of balancing that, where these all have level requirements and they force you to take this feat instead of taking the ability score improvement, because these are very good abilities. So I just wanted to point that out because I think it's a really smart way of balancing the way to gain your more powerful abilities. So the new races are, I just realized I didn't really go over them: Ashen, Half Vampire, Harpy, Medusa, and Undead. Hello, Divinity Original Sin 2, which you could play Undead, which is great. I think it's a funny thing here for those of you that watch my campaign that I DM. I actually use the lingering injuries from the Dungeon Master's Guide as a ongoing effect every time somebody reaches 0. So it was funny when I read this as an optional undead trait if you wanted to give somebody a drawback to playing undead, because otherwise they're basically just kind of all advantages aside from the obvious role playing. The hard factor, the fact that you would have to wear robes or something to walk through town. But you would get a lingering injury every time you fall down to 0, which is just funny reading that because that was their way of balancing undead. Obviously, I would have to do something else because I do that with everybody, is they gain a lingering injury if they fall to 0. Although my players do get a Constitution saving throw, so maybe I would say the undead player does not get that, and they would automatically get a lingering injury. You can be both a skeleton and a zombie, which is kind of cool. Zombie, of course, you get undead fortitude. Skeleton, you get the play dead reaction, which is very much like straight out of Divinity Original Sin 2. That was one of the things that you can do, is fall dead and then not be targeted, which is kind of funny. The new subclasses, there are 4 of them. It is the Cleric Fortune Domain, the Paladin Oath of the Damned, the Sorcerer Flameborn, and the Wizard Blood Mage. These also feel kind of fun and very thematic. To do with, curses and blessings and the nature of these things. I guess Cleric with Fortune is you're kind of a seer. You can use Channel Divinity to cancel out an enemy crit, for example. You gain, at first level, you can use a bonus action to basically have a built-in Bane, which is a negative D4 to the next time an enemy rolls a attack or an ability check, and you can have a number of those equal to your Wisdom modifier. And then eventually you can actually, at 17th level, just straight up give anybody a crit. You can turn a D20 attack roll as a 20. So, I think that's pretty thematic. You are in keeping with twisting the fates and luck and all that. So I think that's a pretty nice way of doing a cleric. Paladin Oath of the Damned, kind of similar to the, Vengeance Paladin, kind of a dark paladin. In this case, it's Warlock themed, where you get a bunch of the Warlock spells. Although Armor of Agathis, Hellish Rebuke, Misty Step, those are all great freaking spells to have on a Paladin. Holy crap. The cool one that I saw here at 7th level, you can, any creature that dies within your aura, which I believe they gain the aura at 6th level, you gain temporary hit points, which is really cool. So as long as you're near somebody, you can kind of suck up their souls and empower yourself, which feels very cool. They changed the Divine Smite into an Infernal Smite, which means they changed their damage type from Radiant to Fire, which interestingly seems like an actual step down, because I think Radiant is way more useful than Fire. And that might be on purpose, because obviously you're not doing Radiant damage at that point. You're doing Fire damage because you are in a pact with you've binded yourself to the 9 hells. So you're more of a Devil Paladin, which is, again, really cool. Sorcerer Flameborn fits really well with the Ashen race that was added in this same supplement. You can spend a sorcery point to negate an enemy's fire resistance, which is great because that's pretty much the only thing you're going to come across if you are a themed spellcaster who likes using a certain kind of element. Well, what happens if the DM throws creatures of that kind at you? Well, there you go. You can spend a sorcery point to ignore resistance. Your Firebolt already ignores resistance to fire damage, which is pretty nifty. And of course, you have resistance there. And you gain an aura similar to the Ashen, where instead of doing auto damage to somebody, you deal damage if they're within your aura while you're casting a fire spell, which I think that's really cool and thematic. You're literally just binding this fiery force together. And then eventually at a higher level, you actually can repel enemies away from you and they take damage. So really, really neat idea. Wizard Blood Mage, hey, shout out to Dragon Age series. That's where I remember Blood Mage is from. You can use your own life force to power spells. Instead of doing damage, which feels like the obvious choice, and the way you could game it is you gain exhaustion, which is a lot different because you obviously cannot take as much exhaustion as you can damage, especially at the higher levels. Exhaustion is actually more of a limiter, so that's really interesting. What it does, it lets you reroll damage dice every time you choose to do that, and you can like turn it on. It's not like just the next one. It's like you turn it on for a minute, and then every time you roll damage on anything, you can reroll that dice. But at the end of that, what is it called? Spell surge. Then you gain a level of exhaustion. So that's actually pretty big. New backgrounds: cultist and urban outcast. Again, feel pretty appropriately thematic to the dark, cursed nature of these characters. Curses. Here are the 3 pages of curses. There are over 40 here, I believe. There's 30 blessings alone. And it's a pretty good mix. They've got minor and major curses. Minor curses are kind of what you would expect. You gain, vulnerability to damage, or you've got, disadvantage on your next attack, or disadvantage on a saving throw. You have to hold on to all your money. You can't buy anything. Usually pretty specific. You can't read a written language. Your swimming speed is reduced to 0. Pretty stuff that you could use as a punishment for things other than dealing damage, which I think is interesting. And I think they all wear off. Well, no, these don't wear off. You have to have a remove curse spell. That's right. The blessings wear off on a long rest. Major curses are like game changers. Those you have to be very, very sparingly with. And obviously the text very much mentions that these are, pretty tricky to use and could be the source of an entire campaign. For example, you strict somebody with blood madness, where they have to roll a wisdom saving throw, or they have to attack somebody next to them. They have to follow somebody, obey them completely. They are sealed inside of an item, the curse of imprisonment, or grayskin, which you have to, every day you roll a d4 and lose maximum hit points. So basically you're afflicted with the death curse, or like grayscale from, A Song of Ice and Fire, the Game of Thrones series. So these are very, very bad things that you really don't want to inflict on your players unless they are well aware, and you are well aware of what these consequences are going to actually have, and a way for them to be able to pursue curing themselves of this, because they're pretty bad. Minor blessings are a really cool idea. It's different than just giving somebody a monetary reward or a gold reward or something. You've got you gain temporary hit points. You automatically stabilize. You can't be surprised. Double your proficiency bonus. Just some kind of neat ideas. Divided up amongst different domains, which is pretty neat. So if you have different, specifically because it's designed for, praying at certain shrines, I guess, so be different themed, gods or cleric domains or things that these are shrined after, but themed after. But, I could see using them for just rewards for doing various things instead of either inspiration or as a kind of loot type reward that's not loot, if that makes sense. And these last until the next long rest. So I think they're pretty nice to have. And the final chapter is a bestiary, which further helps separate this one from other kind of Xanathar-style guides, because most of those don't have NPC stat blocks at all, because they are designed for players. In this case, it really expands upon the concepts and the new races and classes that are introduced, the ones I just talked about. So like the Ashen, for example, you get an Ash Elemental from that Plane of Fire, and then a bunch of NPC stat blocks for the Ashen race, including a giant CR25 King of Ashes Gargantuan Titan, who is a former fire giant that was cast into the elemental plane of fire, I guess elemental plane of ash specifically. So that's really cool to see that they are like expanded beyond just a player race idea into actual enemies. So you could definitely see something there. What's interesting here is like if a player wanted to play the Ashen, then as a DM, you could look into all of this and be like, okay, I think I could actually build a whole like personal arc around other Ashen that exist in the universe based on this. So that's very cool to see. Bloodspawn, that is an ability that the Blood Mage can actually create. So that's very nice to see them here. And then a few more zombie stat blocks, because we saw some more undead, and why not give us some more zombies, including a cool CR10 zombie spider, which, damn, I could have used this actually in an adventure I just ran in the tunnels connecting 2 dungeons together in Tomb of Annihilation. I used a undead spider, and I would have had to tone this one down, and CR10 would have been a little too tough. But I like the legendary action of devouring a corpse to gain hit points. That seems very much like an undead spider, like roaming around and grabbing all that. So just really great layout, really great presentation, fantastic artwork. And I have almost no complaints about any of this. Like, it's just really good stuff. All the races and classes feel very well balanced. I'm digging this one a lot. So let's go over my pros and cons for Ishavar's Guide to Curses Pro. As I just mentioned, incredible original character art and professional layout that looks like an official 5e product. I always want to state, you don't necessarily have to do your product with that exact same style. I think it's cool when all the designers use their own interesting styles, and there's a lot of ones that look very good, but this one looks absolutely fantastic. Pro, 5 monstrous races, 4 evil-themed subclasses, and 2 sinister backgrounds, and they're all pretty damn good and well-balanced, which is impressive. I don't really have a single one that I thought, that one's not that great, which is really, really impressive. Pros, over 40 new blesses and curses, which is what I initially thought this entire product was about. It's only a small part of this product, but it's still a really good part as well, the blessings and curses. And pro, over 10 NPC stat blocks that expand on the player races and subclasses, not just random, monstrous creatures. They're actually drawn from the new content that is added. Cons, my only complaint is Ishavar. What is the point of calling this Ishavar's Guide to Curses? There's nothing about Ishavar. I have no idea what an Ishavar is. Obviously this is like a person that's supposed to be putting this thing together and make it like an in-universe thing, but there is no flavor text from Ishavar. There's no sidebar. This character does not exist as a fun figure in this product. So either leave that off, just call this, a guide to curses or cursed races, whatever you want to call it. Or if you're going to do it, then make Ishavar a character in the thing, because it's, again, as Valos did, as Xanathars did, those are actual NPCs that exist in universe, and they have fun little notes and sidebars and all these scribbles and things in the lines. And that's kind of what I was expecting. So if you're gonna actually do that and have it be from this supposed character, then include some fun little, in universe flavor text in there. Final verdict, gorgeous artwork and a professional layout make this excellent collection of monstrous player races and subclasses impossible to pass up. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson, and you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.